Hey, welcome back, everybody. My name is Wesley Smotherman. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here at Asbury Church, Asbury Counseling Center. And this is episode 3 of Open Mic. Thank you for tuning in. Just to kind of give you an idea of what Open Mic is all about. Open Mic is a podcast that we've put together to kind of help answer life's difficult questions. It also provides a platform for those like yourself to ask those questions and to comment on the things that we discuss, as the purpose of this is, number one, to bring Asbury Church together, the congregation, as well as reach out to the community to help those who are in need. I'm so glad you guys are here. Please stay tuned. We got a message for you that I want to talk to you guys about. So I'll be right back in about a couple seconds. Hey, welcome back. Hey, hope you guys are having a good day. I think that's questionable for a lot of people. I know some people are still concerned about their jobs or more or less just stressed about how they're going to get by. You know, right now at this time, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I know that this is the time that we need to come together, not just as a church, but as a family. And I wanted to take a different approach with you today. And I want to make this just a little bit short for you guys. But I have two audiences I want to talk to today. And the first, primarily the audience I want to focus on, is the men. And so for those of you men who are in relationships, whether you've been married or not, this message is for you. And also this message is for the spouses as well. I mean, you could take a lot from this. But I wanted to talk to you guys today about some of the things that God has been convicting me in my heart and my personal walk with the Lord as I continue on this journey. And so to kind of give you a backstory, I've been going through a lesson called Every Man a Warrior. Fantastic. If you guys are interested in doing a Bible study, this is very good. There's 3 books of this. And if you have any more questions about that, I can definitely help you answer this. But I've been going through this lately, and there was a couple of things that God laid on my heart that I really wanted to share with you. Because one of the biggest things I want Open Mic to be is a transparency. Like, I want to share just kind of like the things that I'm dealing with. Because as a therapist, a lot of people, even my clients, always ask the question, like, do you ever struggle? Or they have this idea that as therapists, because of everything I teach, you know, I do the same things at home. And to be honest with you, I'm not perfect. My wife can testify to that. There's a lot of things that I do right, and there's also a lot of things that I do wrong. So I wanted this to be authentic, and I wanted to be real with you guys on some of the things that God's been teaching me. So I want to make this just not difficult, just short and sweet, but one of the things that God has been teaching me throughout the lesson that I really want to speak to men about is 2 things. Number 1 is marriage, and not much in depth, but just marriage of your role. And number 2, your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. One of the things that I have learned in the last couple of months through this Bible study is that we as Christians have been going about our faith the wrong way. And what I mean by that is we spend so much time investing into small groups, and we spend so much time memorizing the scriptures, and some of us, I feel like, really don't know who God really is. And as I began to learn more through the scriptures of what God requires of me, I am directed back to Matthew 22:36-38, which basically a Pharisee or a teacher of the law is asking Jesus, which is the greatest commandment of all? And Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is and here's the key word, the first and greatest commandment. And I spent the last month just reminding myself that my primary purpose on this earth is to give God everything that I have and to make Him the number 1 priority in my life. I have learned that without that, I am not as successful as I should be as a man of God, as a husband, and even as a father. And so one of the difficult questions that this book began to ask me was, how good of a quality are my quiet times? Now, you got to understand the background. See, I was a youth pastor before this. I was a children's director. I have 2 master's degrees. I taught Bible studies, led Bible studies, wrote a lot of papers on different verses. So I know the scriptures. But this really threw me off because it started to ask the depth questions of how often do you have quiet times? And so a lot of people go, well, what's a quiet time? And so to me, I've defined a quiet time as time that you spend with God, memorizing scripture, meditating on the word, being silent, and in prayer. And I think when you combine all of those together, it creates a wonderful ingredient of just an opportunity for you to draw closer to Christ. And so the first question that I have for you men is, how often do you have a quiet time? Some of us, we consider opening up our phones and looking at the verse of the day, which takes about 5 minutes, and then continue on. And don't get me wrong, those are good things. But I want to challenge you men to go deeper and to really take that step to be proactive and not just reading the scriptures, not just praying, but being still and listening to what God may be telling you. One of the things that I have learned and have really gained through going through this is just how much my day starts off right when I do it first in the morning. Now, some of you, that may not be an option for you. And so find the time that works best for you, but make it a priority. Some of us have been Christians for a long time, and we still are on baby food, as the scriptures would call it. And so one of the things that I've been really disheartened with as I counsel many men and also have a lot of friends is that we as Christians really struggle with leadership, especially for men. You know, the things that I've learned about marriage is that we as men are called to be leaders, protectors, and providers of our family. And let me be honest, I think I'm pretty good at the provider piece. But when it comes to being a protector, or even when it comes to being a leader, that tends to be an area that I struggle with. And so the reason why I start with this is because it's the most important piece. And you guys have probably heard thousands of people talk about having a quiet time or having a Bible time where you wake up in the morning and you read. And for me, the last couple of months have been very simple. It's been between 15 and 20 minutes long of taking a verse, going through it, pulling it apart bit by bit, and then really meditating on it, and then being still and asking God what he is calling me to do with that. And I know that during this time, it can be very easy to be distracted. I mean, let's be honest, like a lot of us are struggling. A lot of us are struggling with finances. We don't know how we're going to pay our bills. We don't know if our jobs are going to be back. And so it's very easy to find time in other places other than the Lord. In fact, it's very easy to, in return, instead of going to the Lord with our frustrations, we turn to either working harder or we turn to substance or whatever, you fill in the blank. And so the first thing I just want to ask you men is, how are your quiet times going? Are you having them? Because they're so important, because there's so much riding on the line, not just for you as a family, but as a community. And so one of the things I just want to encourage you men is just to continue to have a quiet time with the Lord. And if you don't know what that is, reach out to the people at the church or even me, and I can help sit down with you and guide you of what that looks like. But this is what God commands us to do, to love him with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. If I want to spend time with my wife and get to know her, I have to not just spend 5 minutes with her. I have to ask her those deep questions about what she loves, what she enjoys, what are her strengths, what are her weaknesses. And so a lot of that is very similar to our relationship with Christ. You know, I've always learned that what you put in is what you get out of it. If I study 5 minutes for a history test, I'm only going to get 5 minutes of quality of work. And so my challenge to you guys is be proactive and intentional about your quiet times so that it's more about you listening than you talking. The second thing I want to ask you men, and this may be more of a deeper question for you guys, is, men, how are you doing at fulfilling your God-given responsibility to your spouse? And for some of you, you may be like, well, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? And I want to direct your attention to a verse. 1 Peter 3:7 says, "You husbands in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker. She is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. As I said earlier, God calls us to be leaders, to be protectors, and to be providers of our family. And it's our job to care for a wife's heart, which is my third question. Are you caring for your wife's heart? Lately I've been convicted of my attitude. With everything going on and just a lot of the unknowns, I find myself coming home and taking out that frustration onto my wife, taking that frustration out on my kids. And the Lord's been showing me how damaging that could be. And I think a lot of us are in that boat. Like, we don't mean to put that out onto our kids, but it's easier to put that on the people that we love. And so my question to you again is, how are you caring for your heart, your wife's heart? Are you honoring her? Are you loving her? Are you protecting her? Are you encouraging her? Because one of the things that I'm learning is you can't honor your wife if you don't honor yourself. You can't love your wife if you don't love yourself. You can't care for her heart if you haven't been taking care of your own. So everything that we discussed earlier really goes back to the very first point of developing your relationship with Christ and making that the key point. You can't be a godly husband if God isn't the center of it. It doesn't make sense. And so one of the things that God has been showing me is the importance of really making God the center of my life. Because when He is the center of my life, everything else that I do seems to become natural. Memorizing the scripture, having patience for my wife, and really laying down my life for her become a lot more easier. And so I just want to challenge you men to really begin to ask God to examine your heart to see what areas in your life that you need to work on. Are there some things in your life that you could do better at? Because I know for me, I have had a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, just like you guys. And I know that when my heart is aligned with Christ, everything else follows with it. And not only does my wife follow with that, not only does my kids follow with it, but my kids start to see the example of not only how a man should treat a wife or a woman, but how a godly man should be in a time of trouble. So I want to encourage you guys during this difficult time, and I want to encourage you men to really begin to ask yourself that questions. Now, one thing that I often hear is, well, Wes, how can I honor and love my spouse if my spouse is not doing the same thing? And you know what? That's a great question. And I want to guide you to 1 Peter 4:19 that says, so then, those who are suffering according to God's will, now note here, God says that we are going to suffer in this world. Those who suffer according to God's will should, here's the key, commit themselves to their faithful Creator. Who? Faithful Creator, and to continue to do good. So when times are tough, that doesn't change God's calling for our lives. And I know it can be very difficult. I know that during this time, if you have a spouse who may be spiritually, physically, or abusive to you, I want to apologize and say that's tough. And I know that situation can be very difficult. But for some of you who may find yourselves the only one who's keeping God the anchor in the relationship, I want to continue to say keep with that and don't give up. We continue to be faithful because God is faithful. We can rely on the Lord to give us that strength. One of the biggest impacts, or one of the biggest things in my life that God has ever shown me, grace of course, was showing me that grace through my wife. I mean, there were some things that I did in my life that I'm not really proud of. And I remember the day that I had to confess these things to my wife. And I remember my wife looking at me straight in the eyes and telling me that, you know what, that's okay. I love you. I forgive you. And we're going to work on this together. And that just really changed my heart from that moment on because of the grace that she gave me. Now, she had every right to be frustrated, just like you have every right to be frustrated with your spouse. But my wife chose the higher ground and began to show me something that I don't deserve, the grace that God has given us. And so I want to encourage you to continue to put your time and effort in asking God to fulfill you and to give you that energy, to give you that patience. Because for some of you, you need God's power in your heart because maybe some of you are dealing with communication that's struggling, or maybe even marital issues. So as I begin to wrap this up, I want to leave with you a quote by Lonnie Berger. And I want to read this to you guys in hopes that this will kind of help wrap everything up. If you love your wife and give up your life for her, if you show her honor and kindness on a regular basis, if you learn to value her as a gift from God to give you balance and perspective, if you do not resist her differences or be harsh with her as she struggles with her own woundedness, if you give her grace as she wrestles to follow your leadership, then you are a man of God, a model to be intimidated and a shining light in a dark world. Your wife and child will honor you. And that is my charge to you men, is to continue to be proactive in asking the Lord how to change your heart. Because right now is the time that we need to be that firm foundation. Christ is our foundation, but we need to be those leaders, protectors, and providers for our families. Hey guys, please leave a comment if you liked it. If you didn't like it, that's totally okay. Please tell me if you want to compliment on my good looks. That's great as well. Please follow and like the Facebook page. This will be at the Asbury Church Facebook page. And also subscribe and like at the YouTube as well. Thank you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.